scent of potpourri, films we commit to memory. Crossing the felt ropes, watching from home on my TV, looking at all my eyes can see. They tell me I view obsessively.
Hello and welcome to The Obsessive Viewer. We're a weekly podcast that reviews one or two new release titles every episode with an occasional free-for-all segment at the end that we call Potpourri. You can find more of our work, including my written reviews, full episode show notes, and the complete backlog of our episodes at obsessiveviewer.com. You can also write into the show by emailing me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. And if you'd like to support us and get access to hundreds of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer, where you can get access to content at any of our tier levels on a recurring monthly subscription basis, or you can buy individual collections a la carte in the Patreon shop section. So I haven't done much on Patreon recently, but there are over 700 exclusive episodes on Patreon, ranging from TV episode reviews of shows like The Haunting of Hill House, Dark, which I need to get back to. I'm sorry, Robert in Utah. Severance, and Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Loki, and a bunch of other TV shows. There's also book reviews of tons of Stephen King books that have not been covered on Tower Junkies yet, as well as the Expanse series by James S.A. Corey and their new trilogy, their new space opera trilogy, The Mercy of Gods. And you can also get access to immediate reaction reviews of movies like The Fall Guy, The First Omen, Dungeons and Dragons, Killers of the Flower Moon, The Pope's Exorcist, and a whole bunch more. So all of that stuff is available at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. Go and sign up there and support the podcast and get tons of exclusive content with my voice in your ears. Speaking of my voice, I'm your host, Matt Hurt, and you can find me on social media, including Letterboxd, at the username of Obsessive Viewer. And later in the show, I'll be reviewing Zoë Kravitz's directorial debut, Blink Twice. But before that, we're going to go over some movie news and then review Rupert Sanders' remake of The Crow in a non-spoiler and spoiler feature review. And joining me tonight are two critics who, despite the ability to escape death existing within them, cannot escape guesting on the Obsessive Viewer podcast. Their work can be found on obsessiveviewer.com, on midwestfilmjournal.com, and also frequent appearances on the Obsessive Viewer podcast as well. Welcome back to the show, my friends and IFGA colleagues, Mitch Ringenberg and Sam Watermeier. Welcome to the show, guys. How is it going tonight?
Going great. Thank you for having me. And
of course,
I'm glad to spend a little bit of my time being immortal, guesting here on the Obsessive Viewer podcast. So yeah, great to be back. Nice.
Yeah, great to have you, Mitch. Sam, how's it going?
I just rose out of a grave. I'm freaking out right now.
Nice. Well done.
But I'm happy to be here. There could be worse places to be.
Oh, absolutely.
After returning from the dead.
You could be in a weird limbo place with like a French man.
A French man that keeps
like
pushing you down.
Train station or something.
Yeah.
Where crows are circling overhead.
Yeah. Or you could also be in a weird limbo space where you're in a movie theater sitting through 45 minutes to an hour of nothing before some pretty brief like little action set pieces and violence. So yeah.
Spoiler alert.
I know, right? But yeah, so welcome to the show, guys. I usually mention that you recent work from the guests. Mitch, you recently, I think we talked about it last time, you reviewed Longlegs on MidwestFilmJournal.com. And Sam, you wrote a review for the feature movie that we're reviewing tonight, The Crow, on MidwestFilmJournal.com. I've not read either of those reviews. I'm so sorry, you guys.
No worries.
Yeah.
You should be worried. I'm pretty upset right now.
I understand.
I take that personally. Now that taking a second to think about it.
Honestly, it's not for any reason other than I just haven't had time, really. Which is also the reason why I haven't done a lot of Patreon stuff. Sorry, Patreon. But yeah, but I need to get more in the habit of reading everything. But speaking of reading things, you guys can read Sam and Mitch's work at MidwestFilmJournal.com. And also, I want to give a quick shout out to our friend and friend of the show, Nick Rogers, who also posted in his Class of 1994 series on Midwest Film Journal an essay about The Crow, the original The Crow, which I also have not read. So sorry, Nick, if you're listening. But links to all that stuff will be in the show notes of this episode. Yeah. How's it been going in terms of film criticism, movie reviewing, movie watching stuff before we get into the episode?
I'll jump in if you don't mind, Mitch. Well, I recently reviewed The Crow, and we'll get into that, obviously. That was kind of painful to write. Because the original is one of my all-time favorite movies, like top 10. I was obsessed with it when I was a kid. It was the first really dark superhero movie I had been exposed to. Obviously, I grew up with Tim Burton's Batman movies. But The Crow is really hard R, goth, extreme, gritty stuff. And this new version just feels very I guess I'll describe it as Machine Gun Kelly PG-13.
I like that.
But yeah, I don't want to jump into it too much because I know we're about to talk about it. But I'll just say recently, in terms of film writing, that was a bit painful because I had been looking forward to this movie, anticipating it with cautious optimism. Obviously, the original's really hard to live up to. And despite being in development hell for well over a decade, this remake came out at kind of the perfect time to celebrate the 30th anniversary of the original. I feel like 90s nostalgia is kind of at an all-time high right now. It just seemed like the perfect opportunity to reintroduce a new audience, a new generation to The Crow. And it's such a misfire. But we'll get into that later, obviously.
Right. And Mitch, I think last time we talked about Long Legs with you on it on the show. So I don't know. Anything coming up in terms of film writing?
Yeah, I'm hoping to review the new Jeremy Saulnier film, Rebel Ridge, which I've heard good things about. Big fan of his. Loved Blue Ruin, loved Green Room even more. So his last one was decent, but I heard this is really like a return to form.
Nice.
And obviously, just in terms of watching, we just got done with our FYFF screening of cyborg related movies where we watched all kinds of fun stuff. Highlights for me being Nemesis and also rewatching Universal Soldier Day of Reckoning. That's like one of the craziest action movies.
Oh yeah. I'm still blown away by it. Also, Johnny Mnemonic. I had not seen it until we watched it, and I think I said it in my Letterboxd review. The reveal of Jones. We could have paused it, and I could have spent a year guessing like what the reveal was going to be, who Jones is. Would have never guessed what it was. So I was delighted. Yeah. But if we have time, we can talk about that in Potpourri, or we may not have time. I don't know. But anyway, yeah, that was a lot of fun. So good stuff. And let me bring us back into the episode. Yes. So welcome back. Welcome to the show, guys. So if you can't tell, I had a very long day at work today, so I am like exhausted right now. So. But we're going to put on a good show for you guys. And in doing that, I do have a couple of news items before we get to the feature review of The Crow 2024. So if you guys don't mind indulging me, I was looking through the internets for news items to bring up, and I only really grabbed two. One is directly tied to the movie we're reviewing, so I'll save that for a second. But the first one that I have is something that I know we're all familiar with, but Megalopolis trailer's fake critic quotes were AI generated, and Lionsgate dropped their marketing consultant responsible for the snafu. So if you're listening to this a few days ago, I think, or maybe last week, there was a bit of a controversy. So there was what I didn't understand about it was that like the new Francis Ford Coppola movie Megalopolis was like there was a trailer with quotes from critics that were deriding his work throughout his career. And what I had assumed was that those were fake. Like, I didn't look too closely at it, but I had assumed that those were fake AI-generated quotes from fake AI-generated critics. I didn't realize that they were attributing them to actual critics and that it wasn't like some like meta humor thing that just backfired in the public space. It was that they apparently just fabricated the quotes or did it in terms of... Well, really, the article in Variety says that when Variety prompted AI service ChatGPT to provide negative criticism about Coppola's work from well-known reviewers, the responses provided were strikingly similar to the quotes included in the trailer. So from the sound of it, it sounds like they just used AI to pull quotes from critics and then did not fact-check them and just assumed that they were actual quotes from critics and went with it for the trailer. So that caused a whole controversy. What is your guys' position on this, and how did you react to the devastating news that Pauline Kael didn't say bad things for a change about, like, I think it was the Godfather was the one that her quotes were attributed to. But yeah, what did you guys think of this?
When I first watched the trailer, I watched it because I was kind of excited for this movie. I watched the trailer before the backlash, started and everybody figured it out, which only took a few hours. And when I was watching the trailer, I was like, this is kind of a funny idea. Like, I like this. That they're sort of leaning into like, hey, Francis Ford Coppola makes these big, messy, expensive epics, and they're often like slammed upon release. At least that's what the trailer would have you believe.
Right.
And, but we regard them now in hindsight as masterpieces. Now, I don't really know if that's really true, though. Like The Godfather and The Godfather 2, like won Best Picture. That said, I thought that was a really kind of cool, cool and funny, like marketing gimmick. It reminds me of that Lost Highway poster, the David Lynch movie, where it says 2 thumbs way down from Siskel and Ebert, and then it says 2 more great reasons to see Lost Highway this weekend. So I thought that was like a fun and cheeky way marketing move. But obviously that's like completely undone when you realize just how sloppily put together this trailer was. That there's not even one person who would just fact check, like, hey, are these actual quotes?
Yeah.
So I think that's a little bit disappointing. Not only just like the use of AI, again, which just seems to me extremely lazy.
Yes.
That there's that little thought being put into the trailer for the new Francis Ford Coppola movie. So yeah, overall, like, I like the concept. Like, the execution is like sloppy and like disheartening. In terms of just, you know, how lazy that feels to me to kind of rely on AI and not even fact check it.
Absolutely. Sam, how about you? How about you?
Take that, AI. AI sucks.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it is sort of satisfying, though, to see someone use AI and then for it to not work out in their favor.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of controversy surrounding this movie already. I saw a headline recently, and I don't know how much truth there is behind it, but it was claiming that Francis Ford Coppola said something along the lines of wanting to cast people who have been canceled, like Shia LaBeouf. I don't really know who else he would be referring to. Oh, I mean, Dustin Hoffman, I guess.
John Voight. I don't know if he's canceled, but he's a very outspoken Trump guy.
Yeah, it just seems like Francis Ford Coppola is kind of preemptively defending himself, and I don't know, it just seems kind of premature and a bit desperate. It's like there's already enough weight behind his filmography to get people excited about this. So
yeah,
I will say, I guess, in the whole canceled and like woke thing, like that Variety headline or Hollywood Reporter, I'm sorry, I can't remember who made that headline, really like ripped those quotes from a context. When you read what he actually said, it's not like, oh wow, great, but it's definitely not what that headline makes it seem to be. You could definitely tell that they were like, oh, we can have a real headline here that makes Francis Ford Coppola look like some right-wing guy, where really he was just, you know, that wasn't quite what he said. But like I do agree though, Sam, that it's like there's something about kind of the build up to this movie where like everything seems to be going kind of wrong. Like, you know, from just like a PR perspective.
Yeah, and it's crazy also because, like, I mean, I would think that the whole him kissing extras thing would have like sunk a lot of aspects of the it's kind of sad that that's not like as big a PR thing as maybe as the AI generated like quotes are, honestly. Because it kind of seems like people stopped talking about that, at least as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, the movie seems interesting on its own. It's, you know, Francis Ford Coppola tackling a big sci-fi epic, which he hasn't really done before.
Right.
So, I don't know. It's sad that there's less focus on that and more on kind of manufactured controversy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I totally agree. The AI thing, like, obviously, I don't think Francis Ford Coppola was even aware of the process with which that trailer was put together. Yeah. So he shouldn't really get any of the blame for that. Now, the creepy behavior with the extras, I'm not super sure like how legitimate that is or illegitimate. It seems fairly legitimate though. That's completely on him. And yeah, I mean, I'm curious. There seems to be kind of a lot of pressure on this movie just because he financed so much of his his own money on this. And I just can't imagine a world where this is like a big hit, you know?
Right.
I'm really not sure kind of like how they're financially wanting to recuperate from this, especially considering it's been a really long time since Francis Ford Coppola has made a genuinely great movie.
Yeah.
The last one obviously being Jack with Robin Williams.
Well, of course. That it was so good, I always forget that he made it. It's just, that's so wild to me.
Yeah, no, but but obviously, like, I in my opinion, I think his last just incredible movie would be like Bram Stoker's Dracula, which that was even that was over 30 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, I can't really point to like any recent stuff from him. Trying to discreetly look him up. I don't know. I will say that I think it's interesting that in terms of the podcast, it's weird to think, because I was reminiscing at you guys before recording a little bit about just podcasts and everything and how it's evolved over the years. But it's wild to me that like there has now been 2 episodes of The Obsessive Viewer this year that there has been a significant portion of audio has been dedicated to talking about AI. Because like when I reviewed Late Night with the Devil, Mike and I, of course, talked about the AI controversy there. And it's also interesting to kind of look at those two, that example in comparison to this, in that Late Night with the Devil used AI generated art for their interstitials, and that caused a big controversy because it was AI generated, and just by kind of happenstance or by design, those AI generated images are stealing art from actual artists to create that. But that, I remember like on the podcast in my brain, I give it somewhat of a pass because that movie was made like some time ago, before the strikes, before AI really became a prominent thorn in the side of,
it's also
the entertainment industry,
made on an incredibly small budget.
Exactly. Exactly.
Where this film was made this is a $150 million movie, that you would assume there's more resources to pay somebody, or just to even just double check like accuracy. Whereas I think something like Late Night with the Devil seems to be something that's put together on like somewhat of like a shoestring budget. It's more or less a single location film.
Yep.
And I agree, that the AI discussion is a good one to have, but for me, I think like the vitriol and the people like boycotting that film, that felt a little bit overboard to me.
Oh yeah. And here I think it's warranted. And I'm curious if like the critics whose names were used, I wonder if there's any like legal ramifications that they can have against this, or the estate of those who've passed away. I don't know. It's all interesting.
Can I just jump back and clarify something really quick? So we were talking about that article where Francis Ford Coppola was mentioning casting, quote unquote, canceled actors. And I was intrigued because of what Mitch said, to go back and read the full context of it. And it actually is pretty interesting. He says, I just want to read the quote. The cast features people who were canceled at one point or another. There were people who are arch conservatives and others who are extremely politically progressive, but we were all working on one film together. That was interesting. I thought that's actually like a very level-headed thing to say, and it's surprisingly even keeled and like a very civil statement to make in these sort of polarizing times.
It kind of is. It's a little depressing to see how which publication was that?
It was Variety.
Yeah.
It's kind of disheartening to see Variety take a pretty even-keeled statement like that that's actually about like, hey, like these people who like disagree with each other and maybe have like not the greatest past are all working together towards like creating this one work of art. And for them to just kind of take that and say like Francis Ford Coppola doesn't want a woke production and wants to work with canceled actors. You know, that's a little bit depressing. Seeing how clickbaity, and you know, they made that headline, and it really does like kind of give a very false impression. On what he said there.
It's gross. That it's a sign of the times, really. Like, it's so depressing. And I'm glad that, to bring it back to the AI thing, I'm so glad that they caught so much backlash and vitriol over the AI thing, because that's the same thing. Like, basically, it's like they're misrepresenting, either by accident or intentional, what have you. They're misrepresenting people's opinions with having like naming them on the in the trailer and everything. And then here Variety is misrepresenting like what he said to get reactions. It's gross. It's just how it is.
Sorry, my cats are killing each other in the background here.
No worries.
I can't hear them, but
okay, good.
An entertaining show in the back, at least.
Nice. So that is the news regarding Megalopolis. I'm sure that it'll be a movie that is reviewed on this podcast later this year. Finally, to bring us more into the actual review, the next and final news item I have is that the Crow's original director, who, by the way, I just to get this out ahead here, I did not rewatch the original The Crow, so I apologize. I know. I would like to say I didn't have time. Mitch is flipping me off. I would like to say I didn't have time, but I was just basically mainlining the final season of Breaking Bad, rewatching it, and that took up a lot of real estate in terms of the clock in front of me. But anyway, the Crow's original director, Alex Proyas, roasted the reboot after it flopped at the box office. He's quoted as saying, "I thought it was a cynical cash grab. Not much cash to grab, it seems." Which, for context, the Crow reboot opened to $4.6 million with the reported production budget of $50 million. And Proyas also said, where's that other quote? I'm just reading from the, I think, Variety article. One review called The Crow reboot the worst movie of the year, to which Proyas wrote, "The review we've all been waiting for. It's a bit like flogging a dead horse now, so I think I'll stop after this until another funny one comes along." So he was kind of having a field day with that. Your guys' thoughts on this?
Yeah, I just want to jump in to say, I actually, despite not enjoying it very much, I actually don't think it's a cash grab. I think it does at least try to be different. And there are passionate people behind it. I mean, Bill Skarsgård's an interesting actor who doesn't seem to make, silly choices most of the time. Also, I would remind people that Alex Proyas hasn't really made a very good movie in like almost 30 years.
True.
Spoken like someone who hasn't seen Gods of Egypt.
I mean, his heyday was back in the 90s with The Crow and then Dark City. And, I thought iRobot was okay. I think it's, I loved it when I was in junior high, and that's kind of the perfect audience for it. But I don't know. Those who live in glass houses maybe shouldn't throw stones.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of agree as well, where it's like, on one hand, I think Alex Proyas, like, he made The Crow. It is a cult classic and a film beloved by many, including myself. And there was a traumatic experience during the making of that movie where Brandon Lee was killed. And I imagine, looking back on that movie, he has incredibly like complicated feelings. So on that, like in that regard, like, I want to be like kind of more empathetic to like maybe what he's like, kind of why he's dissing this new version. But at the same time, there seems to be like kind of a smugness and like behind his posts about this new Crow movie, where he's like, I knew it would suck. Like, of course it sucks. And it's like, dude, this movie's like not good, and it's still better than like the last movie you made, And I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of like when a filmmaker is, just shitting on other movies that are already like down pretty bad. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like this movie is Deadpool and Wolverine and just raking in all the cash in the world. And it's like, this movie made like $4.5 million its opening weekend. Like, it has a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's like, like, do you really need to like kick it while it's down?
Right.
It just seems a little mean spirited. And to me, it's like, if you're going to be a filmmaker who acts that way about other films, or is very brutally honest with their opinion, you better be like a Martin Scorsese or like a Quentin Tarantino, where you're like, all right, well, you are like one of the best directors of all time. So like, I guess you have the accolades to back it up. And so, and to me, it just seems kind of in poor taste.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And it's something that I saw somewhere. I don't remember who it was. I want to say maybe it was, I don't know if I want to commit to it being Glenn Powell, but someone said that, I think it was like a meme, so I can't even be sure that this is an actual thing that was said, but it was just like, I was at like a party or something, and like I was talking to a very famous actor, and like, this is from the perspective of an actor who is also famous. I was talking to someone who had been there a while and in the industry a while, and I mentioned like, oh yeah, I saw this movie and it was terrible, it sucked, and blah blah blah, and started talking about how bad it is. And then the seasoned actor was like, okay, well, we're all in this industry together, so like, if you have like a negative opinion about that, like, don't voice it, like, because everyone should support everyone, like, because it's all a collaborative thing. And like, that resonated with me, because it's funny. Like, this is a bigger discussion we don't have time for, but basically that kind of just made me think like, what we do, we are not filmmakers, so we're allowed to shit on movies, as we're about to with The Crow. But like, I understand, like, people like in the industry, like, it is an industry. It's bad form to kind of talk shit about someone else's work when, who knows, you might be working with them or working alongside them for something. I don't know if I'm communicating that too well there, but I don't know. And then that's where it seeps into like fandom and like fan reactions, like people who get bent out of shape because someone has reviewed a movie that they like, that they have no connection to, but they have reviewed it poorly. So people on the internet will take offense to that and be like white knights and stands for a movie. And it's like, that's like, what's the point of art if people get just stockpiled on for talking about a movie that they don't like? I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I would jump in just real quick to say also as a reminder that Alex Proyas probably has this remake to thank for leading new audiences to the original Crow.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be, you know, a gateway to that film for a lot of people. And to Mitch's point earlier, you know, about the tragedy surrounding the movie and like how troubled of a production it was, that should make Alex Proyas even more empathetic toward this film, which is obviously having a hard time too. I don't know. I think also, to sum up your points, Matt, I think everyone should just kind of chill out a little bit.
It's needless negativity. Like, that's what it is. It's like you're not adding anything constructive to the conversation. Like, you're just piling on, you know?
Yep. I don't know. It's all the internet was a mistake. So that's my takeaway. But speaking of taking away, let's take away our thoughts from this section of the podcast and apply them to the feature review. That's a terrible segue, but this week for our featured review, we are going to be reviewing The Crow 2024, which is in theaters. It was released in theaters on August 23rd, 2024. Of course, we're going to be doing a non-spoiler and spoiler review for this movie. We will separate the spoiler section. I'll play a clip from the trailer once we transition over to spoilers. If you want to navigate around that, check out the show notes for timestamps, and those show notes are also available at OV440. Good God. So before we get into our non-spoiler review, I'll just say the premise, according to IMDb, is soulmates Eric and Shelley are brutally murdered. Given a chance to save the love of his life, Eric must sacrifice himself and traverse the worlds of the living and the dead, seeking revenge. Director for this movie was Rupert Sanders. Writers were Zach Balin and William Joseph Schneider. And it's based on a comic by James O'Barr. And the cast includes Bill Skarsgård, FKA Twigs, Danny Houston, Josette Simon, Laura Byrne, and Sammy Buhila. So in non-spoilers, what did you guys think of The Crow 2024? And if you want to start with briefly just mentioning the original The Crow, I can get us kicked off on that and just say that I haven't watched the original The Crow in many years. I don't remember when the last time I saw it was, but I know that I rated it on Letterboxd like 2.5 stars. It didn't really connect with me all that much. So I don't know. I kind of want I think movie should be more like The Wire, like a 60 chapter novel on screen, and The Crow didn't do it for me. But yeah, anyway, I will eventually revisit The Crow, the original, but yeah, that's what I went into this remake with. How about you guys? What did you think of the original Crow, and non-spoiler thoughts on the remake?
I just want to say, I think it's funny. I had kind of a Frost Nixon moment at the beginning of this podcast where I think you were just asking us about our recent movie watching. And I basically launched into a review of this movie, as if I was David Frost at the beginning of the Nixon interview, asking him why he didn't destroy the tapes incriminating him. And then it just he's like, I wasn't prepared for this question. And it just awkwardly transitions into something else.
That's great.
That was a really, I feel like I've already kind of had my thoughts much earlier in the episode.
It was a little aperitif to your main review, which I think is just fine. It was very graceful as well.
Absolutely.
I could start and you can bounce off of me, but I know if there's I'll just say my thoughts on the original. I watched The Crow probably much like Sam at a perfect time in my life, probably around when I was 10 years old. Saw it on TV and on HBO, I believe, and it blew my mind. Being a huge fan of Tim Burton, his Batman films, just comic books in general. This was just such a stylish, and at the time it seemed incredibly edgy to me as well. Not having seen very many R-rated movies, I was really just intoxicated by like the production design. Brandon Lee's performance is so nuanced, especially for such a simple story. His character on the page is really not, there's not a lot there, but he has so many shades to his performance of being funny, menacing, sad, gentle. All these different shades you see throughout the movie it's just a beautiful performance. And I really love it. I don't know how I would react to it now, Matt, having seen it the first time now. It is very of its time, in its style, but I'm somebody, I love comic book movies, and I particularly love ones that have like an authorial, vision there. And this definitely has that. I love The Crow so much that I even like the second movie, The Crow City of Angels, which nobody else likes, but I think is awesome. Has great visuals as well. Not as good of a story, not as good of a lead performance, but I think the aesthetic and design of it kind of make up for it. This movie, I was kind of dreading a little bit because the trailer did not sell me. I, like many people on the internet, did not love the look of Bill Skarsgård as the Crow. It felt very like, kind of pandering to Gen Z. The ghastly song in the trailer, that Ozzy Osbourne Post Malone song, that I hear you crumbling, was so bad. So I, just all of that, the only thing I could say maybe good about it was that it did look like it was going for like a hard R rating just based on the violence. So that slightly comforted me, but besides that, I wasn't super hopeful after seeing that trailer. And, I will say I'll start off being a little positive on, at least with some positive remarks. I can definitely appreciate that, like Sam said, this doesn't feel like a cash grab. Like This is somebody completely reinterpreting the source material. Now, this doesn't resemble the original James O'Barr graphic novel or the movie at all. It basically just takes that basic premise and does its own thing with it. And I don't think that's a bad approach necessarily, because to try and copy what the original did would just be pretty foolish. And it would, again, that movie's so of its time. I just don't think you could do that again. Yeah. So I do appreciate that. And this movie has some things that on paper I can admire what it's attempting to do, trying to flesh out the relationship between Shelley and Eric. That's something that's really not explored at all in the original. Unfortunately, this movie feels like extremely empty to me. The relationship between Shelley and Eric, there's really nothing to their characters. And somehow I feel way less for these two people than I do for the original, who we barely spent any time with before he's resurrected. They're pretty bland. All we really know about them is, they're so broken.
They're damaged.
They're so fucked up, man. They had shitty childhoods, and there's really nothing more to them. So these scenes of them kind of falling in love, frolicking around this apartment, even though there's apparently really evil people after them, maybe they should have some urgency of leaving town or something. Just feel like you're watching kind of like a montages from like a Machine Gun Kelly music video, to kind of invoke his name again. So I found, the first half very dull overall. And, this is ultimately a comic book revenge fantasy. It's okay for the movie to be a little silly and to have some fun. Yeah. And this movie doesn't really seem to know that. It's taking itself deathly seriously. And instead of taking pleasure in watching, Eric Draven as the Crow or whatever, like taking out, a memorable cast of bad guys one by one and kind of just enjoying that revenge plot, it's mostly just Eric walking around from apartment to apartment, scrolling through dead people's phones.
Yes.
Uncovering this mystery that we, the audience, we already know the answer to this mystery. So we as the audience are just waiting for him to catch up, which is really, again, is just very dull. And that just, to me, seems like bad storytelling. The movie kind of springs to life at the end. There is a really fun action scene at an opera house that is much more gruesome than I expected it to be. And that's pretty fun. It doesn't feel very necessarily like innovative or like something I've never seen before. It just kind of feels like John Wick with a sword,
Yeah.
But it's at least something. It's fun. But yeah, while I can admire trying to do something different, unfortunately, every choice that this movie makes to be different ends up being worse, like a worse choice in its execution. It doesn't improve upon a single aspect of the original. So, I was very disappointed in this movie. I have a lot more to say, but I'd love what Sam's thoughts are as well.
Yeah, well said. And I agree. Like the whole, my biggest issue with it, having not having like the context of the original, at least not fresh in my mind, is that it just feels so meandering. It feels so like I am all for taking a lot of time to build up characters and build up a relationship, but it's so like rote and one note, and it's so like we spend so much time, like it's like literally the first 40 minutes is building up this relationship, and like in a more nuanced and better written movie with a lot more texture and context for their relationship, I would have eaten that up wholesale. Like it would have worked on me. But by the time the plot gets moving, it's like, okay, yeah, cool. Let's do it. Eventually, let's have some violence. But okay, yeah, this is just the next thing that's happening in this movie that's lacking a lot of texture in the relationships or in the villains themselves.
Yeah, I didn't even mention the villains who are completely forgettable.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I actually texted Sam the next day after we watched this movie, and I said, imagine someone made a Batman movie where for the first half of the hour of the movie, we're just watching young Bruce Wayne hang out with his parents and go to Disneyland and, like do really mundane things. And there's really nothing there that's interesting about their dynamic. They're just a happy family. And then his parents are killed. And in the last scene of the movie, we see him beat up a few bad guys.
Yeah.
That's kind of what this felt like to me, where it's like, I want to see a Crow movie, and I understand you're trying to do something different, but like, it seems that the filmmakers didn't really even understand why somebody would enjoy, why they enjoy the Crow movies in the first place. At least try to capture that essence, because otherwise, why are you even making a Crow movie?
God, what you just said just gave me flashbacks to the Dark Tower. So yeah. Sam, what are your thoughts? How do you, let's get into it.
Yeah, I think what you just said there, Mitch, was perfect about how the movie has no sense of what Crow fans would want from a movie like this. And it's the formula of why the original works really shouldn't be that hard to replicate. Like, there's cool music, There's a real sense of momentum, kind of like a freight train pace. I mean, that movie fucking moves. And maybe at the expense of character development, like you only get flashes of Eric and Shelley's relationship, but I felt more with those than I did with the half an hour that you get of their relationship in this one. I think the original shows that, less can definitely be more. And I think another thing it gets wrong about why superhero movies are appealing in general is that the city that the hero is fighting for really has to be a character in and of itself. And yeah,
like Baltimore in The Wire.
It's not even made that joke.
Yeah, I realized we were joking about that earlier, but it's definitely true here. I mean, in the original, you really sense the impact that the villains are making on the city. And Eric and Shelley are like this kind of warm, flickering light amid all of the corruption. And they're kind of, shining in the midst of all this cold and dark. And you just don't really sense that here. Maybe because the villains aren't as grounded. Like, they seem to have some kind of connection to Satan. And that's interesting to bring in an otherworldly element, because Eric does rise from the grave. And so it's fitting for him to deal with villains that have supernatural powers themselves. But those powers aren't very interesting. The main bad guy, played by Danny Houston, really doesn't do much more than just whisper demonic drivel in people's ears. And you never get the sense that he poses much of a threat to Eric with his own supernatural powers. It's like, oh, watch out, he might whisper in his ear later. And I'm sorry, Mitch, you look like you I want you to jump in, because it seems like you have something to say.
Well, it's just interesting because, again, and it sucks to just be like, well, here's what the original did and here's what this one did, but it's like, it really is interesting how every choice they made to divert from the original just is executed so poorly. Like, it's all admirable on paper. It's like, wow, like in this one, this is a world where like there's demon, like Satan is real, and like this guy has demon powers. It's like, it's not even a bad idea.
Yeah.
And it's not like Top Dollar in the main villain of the first Crow is some nuanced character. He's like a guy who like snorts mounds of cocaine, off of his desk and just wants to burn buildings because he's evil, But for some reason, there's so much charisma to his performance. Like you said, Sam, I think the main point is that you see the impact on the city. Like you know that like he's this really oppressive force. This guy, who is this guy? What does he do? What does he want?
Yeah,
like,
that's what I got from it.
Forever, but like, I don't know anything else about him. Like, he wants to live forever because he's evil and likes to do evil things. I don't know, how much power does this guy have, like, in society? We don't know. He seems like he has a lot because he's always sifting brandy and hanging out at operas, and he's this appreciator of fine arts. But, it's just like, he's so bland. And even Danny Houston, who's a great actor, I mean, you could tell he's just sort of sleepwalking through the role. Yeah. Like, there's nothing here that he hasn't done since, like, is there any difference between this performance and like what he does in like X-Men Origins Wolverine or whatever? Not really.
I want to jump on. Sorry, I want to jump on something you said about him. Always hanging out at opera houses. So his character is kind of in the upper crust of this city. and therefore doesn't really pose much of a threat to Eric and Shelley, who were kind of lower class. In the original, the villains were their landlords in a poor neighborhood. Like they were surrounded by them. They were much more vulnerable to them. So the threat was more immediate. It's like, when are these people going to naturally come across Danny Houston's character? It's not like they're going to the opera house every night.
I didn't even really catch how Shelley knew this guy. Like,
yeah, from what I could tell, and we can kind of expound on it in spoilers a little bit, but like, I don't even know, because like the whole like mystery, quote unquote, surrounding the movie is there's this video that needs to be recovered because it could put an end to Danny Houston's stuff, but
it could cancel him, basically.
It could cancel him, yeah, in the worst way. And then he would be in a Francis Ford Coppola movie. But but like the mystery surrounding that, like, I don't understand how the group of people in that video got to that point. Like, they don't explain like how they are involved in this, and how, like, why are they in the same room? And like, they give like breadcrumbs about Danny Houston's character, but they don't follow through on it. They don't give any context for it. Like, I also did not know, I know nothing about this character. I know nothing about his influence on the city. It's just the most like by the numbers thing. It's like, he's a powerful person because he dresses better than everyone else in the movie. He's a powerful person because his name is on the wall. Also, his name is Rogue, so you know he's scandalous. But like, it's just so surface level. And like, as someone who hasn't watched the original in a very long time, and like hearing you guys talk about the differences between the original and this one, like, if they wanted, and I kind of feel like maybe at some stage they wanted to update it to a modern audience in terms of modern, like, cultural touchstones and social commentary, like, it seems like they started to, but they didn't know how to, or didn't want to follow through on it. Cause like, there's a lot that could be mined about this. Like, they could have expanded on Danny Houston's character and actually demonstrated how his influence on the city is like a detriment to the city as a whole, and have that be reflected in Shelley and Eric's like life, and maybe have him more connected to like their group of friends in terms of what his like wealth and stature and people like him are doing to the lower class, like drug addicted people of the city. Like, have it be a bigger like display of a citywide epidemic and issue. Instead, they don't dive into that or anything. Instead, they just give Danny Houston the supernatural like ability, which on paper is interesting. It is cool. It is unique, I guess. But it also feels like it was lifted and brought into this movie from a completely different movie, because they didn't want to commit to the social commentary aspect of it. And we get a flimsy like explanation for it. And that gives me just so little interest in following the character, and like, it doesn't give me any kind of hook into the movie. And so by the time Shelley dies and Eric goes on his whole odyssey and everything, I'm just like bored. I'm bored with it. And it was really, really a slog to get through.
Yeah, I guess I hate to keep going back and forth between the original and the new one.
Oh, no, it's great.
I guess I do so because if I look at this one just on its own, it's just not a very interesting movie.
Yeah.
I don't think that this Crow really stands on its own. And even the Crow sequels have shown that you can take the basic premise of a guy rising from the dead to avenge a loved one and transpose it to really interesting settings, like the Crow Wicked Prayer, the fourth film, takes the Crow mythos and transposes it to a Native American reservation and kind of turns it into a Western action thriller. And like, that's infinitely more interesting than anything going on in this remake.
Yeah, and you're right. And like every Crow sequel, no matter how like the third Crow is really bad, but like again, it is at least taking the formula and like kind of putting new clothes on it and doing something interesting, doing a different tone. The second movie is almost taking, you know, like that post-apocalyptic vibe of like the first movie and like turning it up to like 11, you know, with its setting. They're all trying to do something interesting. And I think the problem here is like, like I said, this movie just feels very empty. It's very glossy and well shot. And there's a lot of pretty people, you know, Bill Skarsgård and FKA Twigs are both like gorgeous looking people. But you know, there's nothing below the surface, and it feels oddly sanitized for an R-rated movie too. Like, did you guys ever really believe that like FKA Twigs and Bill Skarsgård were like junkies, like that they were genuinely like genuine drug addicts who struggled? Because yeah, we see them like kind of have fun and do drugs, like smoke some pot and like take some ecstasy like later in the movie, but it doesn't feel like two drug addicts spiraling out of control. Like, shouldn't that be a really bad thing that they're like substances? But
and yes, oh my god, yes. And like the thing that brings Shelley to the rehab facility, which we can talk about the rehab facility as well, because like that, oh my god, let me talk about that real quick. Like,
it was weird.
It's weird. It's a massive like complex, and it's clearly like, it looks like incredibly like state of the art, pristine. It's like a big thing. And like they could have connected, maybe there's a cut of the movie or a draft of the script that kind of has that be like, you know, the people in Danny Houston's like circle, or maybe Danny Houston himself has funded this so that he could pick apart people so that he can, you know, do his whole like supernatural thing from it. But there's nothing like that. It's just this weird like anachronistic thing where this massive like facility exists and it doesn't make any sense. Also, it's the easiest place to leave. Like it's so crazy. But like in addition to that, like the impetus that gets Shelley, like what gets her into that facility, is that she is like running because of the plot, because of the mystery and everything. She is being chased, so she bumps into a cop, and like her drugs spill out of her purse, and like that's what brings her to the facility. It's like, if you were going to have a character that's tormented and have a character that is supposed to be like an addict, and her and Eric are like healing each other or being like, to an extent, being codependent with each other as well. But like, if you're going to do that, don't make the thing that puts her in that position be drugs falling out of her purse. Have it be a rock bottom moment for her, and have Eric's connection with her be the thing that brings her out and brings her back from what, and what's frustrating about that is that it's there in the screenplay. Like it is there in the movie that the mystery and her connection to it, that is something that would torment her. But instead, it's just told to us that it torments her or whatever. And it's not used for character building. It's just used for mystery resolution, and third act just reveals that we don't need or care about because it's so haphazard and lazy.
Yeah, I would love to talk in spoilers about like some of that as well, because it does feel like this movie is afraid. Like if you want these versions of this character to be like kind of edgy and flawed, like damaged people, no pun intended. You know, go for that. You know what I mean? Like make the audience have complicated feelings. But they don't go far enough in that. And like, as a result, I think you just have, again, just these very stock, like bland characters. And, Bill Skarsgård, who I think I've seen him be really good in things like Barbarian, and like as Pennywise, he was very memorable, but I don't even know if I think his performance is necessarily very good here, but I can't tell if I just blame like the screenplay with giving him nothing to do. Again, like FKA Twigs, I feel like, Sam, I believe you described her as like low energy in your review, and I would agree with that. But, she's like a massive, like incredibly talented pop star. Like, I just find it hard to believe that she couldn't give a better performance than this. You know what I mean? It feels like nobody here is no performance really springs to life in any way. Everybody just is pretty forgettable.
Yep. I agree.
And in the original, Eric's transformation is so much more dramatic. He goes from being a sweet, sensitive rocker to being a pretty formidable presence. Mitch said earlier he's genuinely menacing, and he has kind of a devilish sense of humor, and the movie suggests that he may kind of be having a little too much fun exacting his revenge. He really seems to relish it, and I just never got the sense that Bill Skarsgård's Eric was really like having fun or kind of reveling in the vengeance. Like he seems kind of childlike and sort of disoriented, which is an interesting layer to add to someone who's coming back from the dead. I mean, obviously you would be shocked by that, but he just never really like kicks it into high gear and like becomes scary or
right.
I don't know.
Well, you get the sense in the original that just through Brandon Lee's performance, I mean, like that it's one of those great performances that adds things to the character that aren't there on the page, you know? And you get the sense in the original that Brandon Lee's character has kind of got the experience of being killed in such a horrifying way, and coming back has really sort of made him snap a little bit in a way, like you get the sense that he's a little crazed at times. I mean, there's just so many great touches to that performance. But here you're right, Sam, it's like again, everything kind of on page I can sort of admire about this movie. It's just everything about the execution is so lacking, because you're right, it's like they're not trying to do the exact same thing. He's more childlike. He's more, honestly, like he's a little more like scared of these bad guys and things like that, which again isn't bad, but there's just really I don't know. I just really did not enjoy like there's just no fun being had. I don't know. I'm rambling there, but I guess I'm trying to grasp there's really nothing there.
Yeah. And what is there, or in terms of like that crazed aspect of it in this version of it, is things that like I feel like are just told to us, are told to him, and by extension told to us. Like I think someone at one point says, "You really enjoy all this killing and everything," and it's like,
does he?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's just, it's so low effort and a shame.
And I just want to say real quick, the action scenes are just kind of pitiful. Like they happen in these very brief fits and bursts. And if this movie is trying to emulate John Wick, which it seems to do, for a few seconds at a time.
Yeah.
It's like, why not just go for it? I mean, when we had our marathon of action movies over the weekend, Like, we saw guys get decapitated with baskets and baseball bats. Mm-hmm. And we saw a guy smash a bowling ball to bits with his bare fist. Like, if Eric has these supernatural powers that make him, invincible, why not, like, really have fun and get graphic with that? Like, it seems to pull every punch and just shy away from really taking a deep dive into gnarly action until that opera house sequence. But that's the only sequence where the action seems to really come alive.
Yeah. And even that's slightly cut around too, like in terms of cutting back to things. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but it's just, it's frustrating. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm definitely, we can get into spoilers. Yeah. What I was about to say, I'm like, I can probably just save it.
Yeah. Let's go into spoilers for The Crow 2024, which again is in theaters now. And I don't recommend it. What did you, before we go into spoilers, what did you guys rate it on Letterboxd? And is it going to make your top 10 lists or any end of the year lists? And then we'll go into spoilers.
Definitely top 10 most disappointing films of the year. Not that the trailer gave me a lot of hope, but I want this franchise I do want this franchise to live on, because I have enjoyed some of the subsequent entries and some of the other, love the graphic novel. I love this series more than just that first film. But anyways, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars on Letterboxd. It's not a Madam Web level disaster by any means. But it really is just bland and forgettable and quite dull.
Yep. Sam, how about you?
I think Mitch said this before we saw the movie, but he said it would be a miracle if this was a 3-star movie. And unfortunately it's not. I would go with 2 stars as well. And for context, I would give the original as a 5-star all-time favorite for me, like in my top 10 of all time. So I was really disappointed. I didn't hate myself while I was watching it by any means. Like, I had a decent time with a bad movie, but it's not very good.
Well said. I also rated it 2 stars. I didn't like it, and it's not, like you said, Mitch, it's not Madam Web level bad, and it's a competently made movie with set pieces that come too little too late, but are memorable in their own right. But really, I was bored throughout it. It was boring, and it didn't grab me, even with a ton of character building as best as they could do. In that first act, it just didn't hook me, didn't do anything for me, and then it wasn't good. So 2 stars, not going to make any lists or anything of mine. But let's go into spoilers for The Crow. Oh, I forgot to mention, where can people find you guys online, social media and stuff? And then we'll go into spoilers. Mitch, where can they find you?
At Midwest Film Journal. And you can also find me on Letterboxd at wounded_kite. I'm post on there pretty frequently because I watch a lot of movies.
Nice. Sam, how about you?
You can also find me on Midwest Film Journal and Letterboxd at Sam Movie Man.
Nice. All right. And links to all that is in the show notes, of course. Let's go into spoilers for The Crow. I'm going to play a clip from the trailer if you want to navigate around it. Check the show notes for timestamps. Those are also at obsessiveviewer.com/OV440. Jesus. And now I'm going to play a clip from the trailer. When we come back, we are going to be spoiling The Crow.
What's the worst thing you've ever done?
I saw things. I shouldn't have seen any of it.
Zoë! Zoë! Please don't do that!
I feel you crumbling, my arms down to your heart.
When someone dies, a crow carries their soul to the land of the dead. But sometimes something so bad happens that the soul cannot rest. Until you put the wrong things right.
All right, so spoilers on for The Crow, and let me get us kicked off by asking you guys, what is the worst thing you've ever done?
Probably shoplifting or something when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
I answered that earnestly, and that one time I ran someone over and just kept driving.
Oh, there you go.
I was in the car with Mitch. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I was like, still to this day, like I'll just bring it up randomly. Like, remember when you ran that dude over? That was insane.
I have been searching for you guys so long. I've got hospital bills that you guys need to pay for. I'm so glad this mystery has been resolved. Yeah. So The Crow, let's go into spoilers. Yeah, what do you guys want to talk about in spoilers? Mitch, you had something you were gonna bring up?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny because there's really not a ton you can spoil about this movie.
Right.
It follows I mean, I think that's the other problem with pacing this so slowly, and it being a remake, because most people seeing this have seen the original. So when it's taking so long to get to him becoming the Crow, you're just like kind of waiting. You're like, why is this taking so long? Like, I know where this is going to go. Whereas the other films, he's crowing it up 5 minutes in, you know? But I was going to say that after the big action sequence, you know, again, one thing that they did, which was actually kind of stupid, I actually thought was like, this was the one decision they had that I don't think was good on paper, was that like, oh, he can bring Shelley back from the dead. And I don't like that, because just this movie is so weird because it like kind of tries to over explain the Crow mythology, but it never actually feels very fleshed out at the same time. Again, I think this movie just being afraid to be comic booky and like leaning into being comic booky. Like in the original film, it's just a crow just guiding him around, and the movie's so removed from reality that you just buy it, right, as the premise, and it's paced so well. Here it's like, no, he has to like solve it himself, and no, we had to explain like how this resurrection works and like what the terms are. And I don't know about you guys, but like I just found the ending to be like incredibly unsatisfying. Like she comes back and then he's just like, and I'm just like chilling in limbo, Crow world now. Do you guys feel like they were kind of trying to like set it up for a sequel, sort of?
Yeah, probably. But like, here's the thing: is the whole soul for a soul thing? Is that not from the original?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, that pisses me off too.
The original and the comic book are literally just like, the Crow is bringing you back because something horrible happened to you. Like, that was so bad. Your love was so pure. It was so pure. And what happened to you was so bad that it's like transcended, death, and you're being resurrected to make this right. That's it. And like, once you kill the person, like once you kill the people responsible, you can rest and like you can die. Okay. And like, that's, and the movie kind of implies that they can be together in like the afterlife or whatever. But, again, in this, I didn't like the kind of the over explanation, and, kind of what you guys were saying too about not having fun with sort of the concept of like, he can't die, so you can do anything. I did like how this movie does seem like he seems more in pain when things are happening to him, and like he'll have like a bone break and he's like putting it back in place and stuff like that. Like, that is kind of cool. There's very little of it in the actual movie, though. Unfortunately, the movie doesn't have that much action in it. But yeah, so that's kind of my scattered, like, sort of spoilery thoughts that I just didn't like where this movie led ultimately. Yeah.
Sam?
Yeah, I feel like the idea that he can save Shelley kind of cheapens the whole premise. Kind of gives it an excessively happy ending. And I feel like some of those other criticisms you have, like the over explanation of everything, the over complication of things, and this sort of detective work that he does, those feel like studio notes to me. Like, I feel like that was a matter of studio interference. I feel like maybe people were saying, you know, this has to be like a Marvel superhero movie in the sense that it has this intricate mythology and you know, the Batman recently had a detective story at its core and you know, kind of a film noir vibe. I feel like that was, you know, a matter of slick executives, of which there are like 50,
oh my god, yeah,
in the credits for this movie.
Never a good sign.
Like, I feel like the producer credits were before the cast credits. Like, I feel like right out of the gate it was like produced by this person.
Well, because it's been in development hell for so long that there's probably still people who are just like contractually like need to be attached to this thing. I mean, I say this not knowing how fucking Hollywood works at all. That's kind of my takeaway. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's like either studio notes or just trying to be something. But I mean, this is like a silly premise. Like, and it's like okay for it to be a silly premise and like have fun with revenge. Like, if you watch the original Crow, there's a lot more like 90s action, like one-liners and like stuff like that than you would maybe expect for a movie that seems so gothic on the outside, you know, especially with like Ernie Hudson's character. And there's a lot of like, I'm taking your badge, like quit looking into this. And, you know, with like him being like, I gotta quit smoking these things, you know, like smoking cigarettes. It's like, you know, it's just like, it's like, it wasn't afraid to have fun, and it didn't take itself so deathly seriously. I just don't understand why you're going to adapt this property if you want it to move like molasses and have no fun.
And speaking of like notes, like studio notes, another thing that kind of felt like that is like, I assume that this isn't in the original. I'm sure it isn't, but like my headcanon for this specific thing I'm about to say is that I imagine that one of those thousands of producers said like, oh, what if we have a part in the movie where he suddenly starts to doubt his love for her and loses his powers? And then I imagine someone's like, no, that's kind of fucking stupid. And then the producer being like, oh, well, I'm going to pull my funding then. And so they have to put that in there. Like, that's my headcanon for it, because it felt so weird and like it didn't work for me.
Yeah, it's like, wow, this person, you didn't know everything about this person you knew for a week. Like,
this person was like brainwashed into murdering someone.
This person he met in rehab.
Yes.
Who was involved with really dangerous people that he then had sex with for a week and then, you know, were killed because of the terrible people she associated with, and didn't warn you about, didn't say, hey, you know what, we should get really, really far away from here. Let's just hole up in this apartment and do a bunch of drugs and get killed. I mean, that just like also just feels like it like makes, I don't want to say it makes the characters less likable. It's more just like, okay, these characters don't even seem very smart.
Right.
You know?
It just feels so slapped together. Yeah.
Another thing that kind of felt a bit studio notish to me was like the use of Joy Division and Gary Newman songs. Like, they were welcome. I was surprised to hear them, but it felt like a producer saying, well, we need some on Crow brand music for this. It's like, let's throw in.
The reaction to the trailer was really negative from that Ozzy Osbourne Post Malone song. So like, let's put in some like OG Crow style music. And honestly, like some of the songs in this, like I like actually better than the songs in the original soundtrack, like the Joy Division and like Gary Newman, like you mentioned. But you know, again, yeah, same. It's like, it's enjoyable in the sense of like, oh, there's a song I like. You know, not in like oh, this is really elevating this sequence. And there are a couple moments when they use it, like there's a scene, it's actually a really cool shot of where he's like walking out and there's like the crow following behind him, and there's like that cool Gary Newman like I hope you guys enjoyed that. But oh
yes.
Yeah, that's like, ooh, like anytime that happens, like one of these cool songs plays, the movie seems to like threaten to like, oh, we're gonna be fun now, like, yeah, here we go. And then it's just like, no, he walks into this apartment and like mopes around again. And
yeah,
the movie's like 80% in apartments, like,
yep.
Like,
yep.
it's oh man, I hate to just keep piling on, but
yeah,
it really is disappointing, especially for something that, you know, I remember they announced like Jason Momoa is going to be in like a Crow remake. And I was like, I don't like that casting. He's too beefy. I probably would have liked that version more.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
Yeah.
Going back to the music for just a second, like the original has some of the coolest musical sequences of all time. Like the transformation scene set to Burn by The Cure, that's like an all-timer sequence. It's so badass.
Amazing. Yeah.
And like there's a sequence where Eric is fucking soaring across rooftops in the rain while 9 Inch Nails plays, and it's a cover of Joy Division's Dead Souls. Like, it's just fucking badass. And if you're going to make a Crow remake, like, I realize it's a daunting task to live up to those sequences, but like, at least try.
Yeah.
God damn.
Have a passion for it, because it felt like there was no passion here. Yeah. What did you guys think of the one really good sequence, the opera violent bloodbath thing? I dug it. Like I said, it's too little too late, but also just the fact that like part of it is interspersed with just flashbacks, and like I was like, well, this is the one sequence that's not cut to hell and everything. Why include that? Like, have just something for, you know, someone with more than a Gen Z attention span.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was it was like a cool sequence, but it wasn't. It's like a cool sequence that like I would maybe watch again on YouTube or something. But, and there were some cool elements. I love when he's like walking up the stairs and he's getting like riddled with bullets. There's like a couple cool shots. I like how he's like using the sword that's been stabbed through him to like kind of fall on people and stab them with the sword. Like that was like, again, some kind of, it was using a little bit of like his immortality, like the can't be killed. Like I thought that was kind of a fun use of it again, but just for a brief flash. I think I was more like excited about that scene just because something exciting was finally happening in the movie, where I was like,
absolutely.
Oh, okay, here we go. But that's like the big ending scene of the movie. I mean, it is really interesting that that's really like the only big scene we get. Also thought it was interesting, you know, like every Crow movie, I think, just about, they always have to kind of take away his powers at some point near the end, because there's no stakes really. You know what I mean? It's hard to have stakes at the end, right? If he's just like, well, he's not going to die. They always going to have to take his powers. I was kind of, it was kind of interesting they didn't do that here, but what they did instead, like, made no sense. Like, Danny Houston somehow gets crowified for a second. Yeah. And then he goes in, you know, that was weird. I don't know. It just felt overly complicated. Mm-hmm. Like, didn't need to be. They could have just simplified it, stuck with what's fun about the other movies. I don't know.
Yep.
What's weird about the opera sequence is, while it's cool on its own, it doesn't really work in the whole context of the movie, because up until that point, Eric is kind of a wimp. Mm-hmm. And like kind of shies away from really exacting his vengeance to the full degree, and he viciously mows down like dozens of dudes in that sequence, just
in
viciously,
brutal fashion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's more gruesome than anything in pretty much any other Crow movie. And you're right, it just feels like all of a sudden he's a completely different, and I think, I'm sure we're supposed to kind of believe, like, you know, he's been pushed to the limit, is accepting his destiny, right? But like you said, Sam, his suit up sequence before that is really anticlimactic and set to Enya for some reason. No bueno.
No.
Yeah, the suit up sequence is really lame because, like, it's just him like putting eye makeup on with this like low key Enya song, and it's just like
Tattoo Ink, which I thought was kind of cool, but like
I didn't realize it was your favorite movie of all time.
Yeah,
but
yeah. Don't say bad things about this movie, Sam. All right.
But it's just like very low key. Like, it's not a very exciting sequence. And if he's getting ready to like just obliterate a bunch of dudes, you would expect the build up to that to be a little more exciting.
Yeah.
It's just like, come on, man.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else about The Crow? I will say, I feel like I said a lot more than I expected to, like, honestly. And it's at the end of the day, despite how much we've talked about it, it still feels like a very empty movie, a very empty, like, just not good movie.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I'm not like, this offended me. It's just disheartening, and the fact that you can kind of see some ambition there, some competency in the movie as well, you know, it's like that almost like kind of makes it a more dispiriting watch, just because you see that like they could have potentially been capable of making something interesting or like worthy, and it's like you kind of, this is the first theatrical Crow movie to be released since 1996, you know. Jesus. and it's like I was very let down. This kind of felt like the 2019 like Hellboy movie to me, where it was sort of like, okay, like you're bringing back this property and it feels like you're trying to do something different, but like, why is, you know what I mean? Like it all amounts to kind of like a shrug, you know, just like to make the movie because you can make it.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to correct you for a second. The Crow Wicked Prayer did play for 1 week in Seattle, Washington, my friend.
I forgot you were at the premiere.
Jesus. Well, this will be Mitch's final appearance on the Obsessive Viewer podcast.
Yeah.
I can't.
That was embarrassing on my part.
Isn't that weird though? That's what its theatrical release was.
That's nuts.
that must have been some contractual thing.
Mhm.
I do want to say that the third Crow movie, before it fell apart, was supposed to be, it was called, you can read the script for it online. The PDF is like everywhere. Called The Crow 2037, directed by Rob Zombie, written and directed by Rob Zombie.
Jesus.
That might have been amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I I actually love like older Rob Zombie movies. So, like, you would have to say this, Matt. It would have been more interesting than what we got.
Oh yeah, I would have a stronger opinion of it. Whether that's a stronger in the negative or positive remains to be seen, and can probably be sussed out by my previous opinions on Rob Zombie movies. But it would still be much more interesting for sure.
Yes. There would be a lot more to talk about.
Yeah. And I would wager a guess that the 1 week screening of that one installment in Seattle, was that maybe for awards qualifications, do you think?
It was an Oscar hopeful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought so.
Indie darling.
Yeah. Okay.
It does co-star Dennis Hopper.
Oh, nice. Okay.
As a satanic priest who speaks in I don't know how to say this in a politically correct way, like hip hop slang.
Oh no.
It's quite a performance. It's definitely, at the very least, Matt, it's worth like watching some clips on YouTube.
Okay. I will add that to my list for sure. But do we have anything else to say on The Crow, or should we close out this review? Crows out this review.
We can close it out.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. And to reiterate, once again, we all rated it 2 stars. Did the conversation sway either of your opinions to change your rating at all?
No.
Nope. It just solidified my feelings.
Yeah. I really, I wanted nothing more than to come on this podcast and say, wow, it was way better than I thought it would be. I wanted that so badly, and that was not my experience, unfortunately.
It's unfortunate. And as someone who doesn't have a connection to the original, I was left thankful that I would have you two on the podcast to bounce off of, because like I said, it's just an empty movie to me, and it's a shame. So, yeah. So once again, you guys can find Mitch and Sam's work at MidwestFilmJournal.com. You can also follow them on Letterboxd. Mitch is at wounded_kite, and Sam is at Sam Movie Man on Letterboxd. So we are going to, I'm going to do a secondary review. So we're going to bid adieu to Mitch and Sam. But before you guys go, what do you guys have coming down the pike in terms of reviews? Anything in the works? Am I putting you guys on the spot?
I'm going to review Rebel Ridge.
Right.
I can't even think about, I can't really piece together what movies are coming out that I'm excited for.
I've heard there's a movie coming out called, I think it's Speak No Evil.
Yeah.
Is that?
I haven't seen any trailers for
that.
Terrifier 3, that trailer came out today. I'm really excited for that.
Nice.
And I'll probably come on. I think I signed up on your sheet here to talk about Joker 2.
Oh, yes, you did. Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That will be a fun conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Sam, how about you?
I actually will have a review of a documentary coming on VOD this week. It's called Don't Turn Your Back on Friday Night. It's about a musician named Ike Riley. He's kind of a harder-edged Bruce Springsteen. He has kind of a cult following, and the documentary is about that and how he's involved his family in his music, and it's pretty interesting. So I'll have that coming up pretty soon. Nice.
So in other words, don't turn your back on Midwest Film Journal when that review posts. Yeah. Okay. Well, I am going to go ahead and kick you guys off. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this review of The Crow. Yeah, it's always a pleasure, and I'm sure I'll definitely bug you guys to come back frequently as you guys will allow me to. And before we get to our secondary review, I want to take a quick moment to remind you that if you like the show, please take a moment to follow us on social media and subscribe to and rate the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or whatever your preferred podcast app is. And don't forget to subscribe to the Obsessive Viewer Podcast's YouTube channel as well, where I have some videos posted and live streams of podcasts occasionally, and also audio versions of all the episodes are available there as well. And if you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, you can go to Libsyn and use promo code OBSESS when you sign up for a new account. You'll get up to 2 months free depending on when you sign up during the month, and we'll get a commission on it as well. I've been using Libsyn to host all 3 of the podcasts for almost a dozen years now and never had a problem. Swear by them. They are amazing. And there's a lot of really cool features there. So check that out, Libsyn.com, and use the promo code OBSESS. And now back to the show.
They tell me I view obsessively.
And for tonight's secondary review, I'm going to actually break the format a little bit and do a non-spoiler and spoiler review for Blink Twice. So Blink Twice is currently in theaters. It also was released on August 23rd, 2024, much like The Crow. And the premise, according to IMDb, is when tech billionaire Slater King meets cocktail waitress Frida at his fundraising gala, he invites her to join him and his friends on a dream vacation on his private island. As strange things start to happen, Frida questions her reality. Director for this movie, making her directorial debut, was Zoë Kravitz, and writers were Zoë Kravitz and E.T. Feigenbaum. And the cast includes Naomi Ackie, Channing Tatum, Alia Shawkat, Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Adria Arjona, Haley Joel Osment, and Gina Davis. And like I said, I'm going to do a non-spoiler review followed by a spoiler review. I'm going to break up the spoiler review with a clip from the trailer. Check the show notes for timestamps to where you can find it and everything to navigate around that. So here we go, non-spoiler thoughts on Blink Twice. So there are some pretty obvious comparisons to make for recent movies like this. So there's obviously a lot to take in from it as being, if you want to be kind of derivative of it, or if you want to be a little reductive, or I don't know, if you want to be critical of it, as I'm about to be, it seems like derivative of movies like Get Out, Don't Worry, Darling, other kind of social commentary, thriller horror movies, like that. And it's to its detriment that it is inviting those comparisons, because unfortunately the movie doesn't really transcend the material or transcend the political commentary that it's playing with. It doesn't transcend that. It doesn't say anything new with it or unique. And that was the biggest hang up I had with it, is that as this kind of social commentary thriller, it was pretty light on the actual commentary. And I'll talk about that in spoilers in more detail. But what I was kind of left with was not so much that it's not so much that it felt like Zoë Kravitz didn't have much of a message with it. It felt, at my most critical, it felt a little opportunistic. Maybe not opportunistic. Maybe that's not the right word, but basically it felt like it was capitalizing on like the kind of social climate that we find ourselves in now, post Me Too movement, with a lot of different like cancellations and a lot of different controversies and a lot of very public just disintegrations of people, their professional careers because of inappropriate behavior, illegal behavior, and horrendous and abhorrent behavior in certain circumstances. And I am all for that type of story. I'm all for movies that contain that messaging and contain the messaging of accountability, holding people accountable for horrendous things that they do, not letting elites or people in positions of power get away with the things that they do to basically treat people as subhuman or treat people as things for them to just be entertained by, or objects for them to be viciously acting toward, basically. By the way, this movie should come kind of with a very big trigger warning. It has a lot of violence against women, and a lot of sexual violence as well, and a lot of disorienting factors in it as well. So yeah, I really felt like the movie was trying to say a few things, but fell incredibly short. And as a byproduct of falling short of that, it felt derivative of several different movies. I'll talk more about that in spoilers, but the long and short of it is there is kind of this centralized mystery. So Frida, played by Naomi Ackie, she and her friend Jess, played by Aaliyah Shawkat, are brought to the private island of a tech billionaire, who has like just a bunch of people there. His friends and a bunch of women are there, and they are there for like several days. It's a little unclear about how long they're there for, but basically they just party every night, and there is a lot of like mysterious stuff that goes on in terms of memory and lack thereof. And that was honestly the strongest point for me. The strongest point for me was having these characters experiencing these just lavish drug-fueled party scenes or party nights, and then waking up the next day kind of just slowly not remembering or forgetting elements of it. Like the one big strength to this movie is that I feel like Zoë Kravitz and the people that, you know, made it with her, they, like, this movie does a pretty solid job of depicting that disorienting feeling of having like quick clips of very illicit drug use and partying on this isolated island free of anyone else around them, and waking up the next day and being disoriented and not remembering specifics about it. Like that, the way that's visually represented in the movie is really, really solid. It's really interesting. It's disorienting. The editing is really cool. And it does a good job of keeping those sinister undertones just kind of below the surface. Like it's just presented as this disorienting effect of, you know, just snippets of people's memories of like running across a lawn or taking drugs in like at a table or something, just quick clips of that. And that does a good job of hinting at something sinister below the surface, but not making that sinister thing be the forefront of it. It's not driving that yet. And I kind of really like that. I really liked the way that introduced certain elements of tension, but unfortunately there wasn't a lot of follow through with that, because once we get to a point where like a character is telling Frida that, oh, there's something weird about this island, there's something weird about what's going on here, it's more just them telling the audience that instead of showing it to us. And I feel like there was an opportunity to really amp up that disorienting effect, that editing that's done so well to disorient both the audience and the characters. It would have been better suited if the movie had amped up or ramped up that editing technique, but instead it's kind of like across the board, it's the same in each sequence. And I feel like there should have been an escalating aspect of that as the movie progressed. So that kind of had the adverse effect of having like the reveal of what's going on and the kind of thing that brings us into the third act of the movie. It kind of fizzled a little bit. It didn't really hit with as much of a as much of a sledgehammer as it should have, because we didn't have that escalating tension through those sequences. So having said that, like, I kind of wish that had been better, like, that had been better attended to, like that escalation of tension and the mystery surrounding it, because unfortunately it kind of fell flat by the end. And by the time we get the reveal and we get like the big set pieces of the final act, it just kind of falls a little bit on deaf ears because it doesn't really connect all that well in terms of like what the greater like point is being made, what the greater messaging is of the movie, because it just feels like Zoë Kravitz didn't really know exactly how to communicate it, or the movie itself in the edit didn't know how to communicate it or find the messaging that it was going for, which I'll talk more about in spoilers. But having said that those non-spoiler thoughts on Blink Twice, I will say that because of those interesting kind of editing techniques and that interesting disorienting effect that's done, in terms of like, even though it doesn't escalate the tension or it doesn't drive the tension as well as it should, I think that it was interesting as a way to communicate that disorienting feeling that Frida experiences and the other women on the island experience as well. And so much so that it makes me interested to see what Zoë Kravitz will do going forward as a director, because I think that there's a lot of promise there. There just wasn't a lot of follow through in this movie and a lot of follow through in the messaging as well, which I'll talk more about in spoilers. But overall, I will say that I initially rated this 2.5 stars out of 5. I ended up, as I was kind of reflecting on it, I lowered it to 2 stars just specifically because of the ending. The ending just really kind of really got under my skin in a bad way, and I'm going to talk through it in spoilers. And this is as good a time as any to go into spoilers for Blink Twice. So once again, I rated it 2 stars out of 5. I lowered it from 2.5 stars to 2 stars, and that is my rating on Letterboxd and in life. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Blink Twice. Now I'm going to play a clip from the trailer for the movie. If you don't want to be spoiled, don't listen, or I'll give you a chance to turn off the podcast as I play this clip from the trailer. When I come back, I'm going to be spoiling Blink Twice. Here's a clip from the trailer.
Cute nails. Thank you.
Our resident wonder boy, Heather, Camilla. Later. What's up, man? I don't know who that is.
We're going to my island for a few days.
Do you guys want to come?
This is crazy. Did we just jet off to a billionaire's island with a bunch of strangers? No, he's not a stranger. He's Slater King.
Everybody say, making memories! Making memories!
You having a good time?
We're having a great time. We're drinking champagne and we're eating amazing food. So do you think the human sacrifice is before or after dinner?
The legendary parties of Slater King. Not what I thought it was gonna be.
We still have fun. It's just a little different now.
What do you mean?
Phones, please.
All right, so spoilers on for Blink Twice, and I'm going to kind of work through my thoughts on this movie a little bit here. I want to start with Slater King as a character, and I kind of feel like I might actually change my opinion a little bit as I talk through this, so bear with me. But basically, at the beginning of the movie, we're introduced through like video feeds and everything of Slater King having been canceled for something. And he's kind of on, I think he's on kind of a redemption kind of, or like PR kind of tour to kind of reclaim his name and be, better in the public grace and everything, in public opinion. But it's intentionally vague. It doesn't go into detail about why he was canceled, what he said, what he did to get canceled, or what have you. And I'm okay with that to an extent, but the problem is that the movie introduces us to Frida as someone who is, on one hand, longing to be successful and being an influencer, being in the upper echelon of society where Slater King and his billionaire friends are. Like, that's an aspirational aspect of Frida's character, which I like that for her. I like that for the characterization. And she's also very much drawn to Slater King. And I think that there is an attraction there, as well as just admiration, aspiration for her to be on his level and to be in with him. There's a big point to be made, or there's a big I don't know. There's a lot of attention paid to her nails and how she does them herself. I think that it's implied that she wants to be like an influencer or be like a nail designer person and become famous for that. But that's also kind of a red herring for the plot, because that's what is used for us to signal to us and to Frida that she has been to the island before and has been, and this is where the trigger warning comes in, has been brutally raped by Slater King numerous times. However, like for years, possibly, at least on 2 separate occasions, a year apart, she's been on the island and been subjected to vicious rape by Slater King, on this island. And I think that it's ballsy. I mean, it's a disturbing revelation, but it also, again, it feels a little bit quick to get us to that point, to get us to that reveal where it's just like a despicable just orgy of rape on the island that's just disturbing and horrifying. Again, the editing is done really well there. I think that it's communicated well in an unsettling way. It's just not built up to that point yet. Or it's not built up to that point adequately enough through that kind of the disorienting, unsettling nature of the poor memory stuff. But the big thing that I have, the big issue that I have with the movie is the ending. And I'm going to spoil, I am going to spoil Poor Things. So fair warning, I'm going to spoil Yorgos Lanthimos's Poor Things. So if you don't want to be spoiled on Poor Things, just stop listening. But one of the big issues I have 2 big issues with the ending of this movie. And the ending of the movie is that Frida gets the upper hand, and after killing so many people on the island, after so many people are killed on the island, it comes to a point where she's talking to Slater, and there's something about him talking about forgiving and forgetting and everything. I think that it connects to what Frida does. But the reveal at the end is that, like, when they're back on the mainland, it's revealed that he has been continuously heavily sedated and poisoned by Frida to the point where he doesn't have a memory or anything. And she is now married to him and has all of his money, which on paper, that is a solid kind of like, that's a solid like power dynamic shift. That's a solid like, now I'm in charge kind of like now you've got your comeuppance, and now this character is finally getting what she wants. On the surface, on paper, that works as a powerful statement, but I didn't like it, specifically because the nature of what she went through in the revelation that she had been through that before numerous times, violently raped, almost killed, violently injured on numerous occasions. And the big reveal is that she's been there twice, at least twice, over the span of like a year's time. So she has held, like, in her subconscious, not aware of it or not remembering it, she has held on to that trauma subconsciously for an entire year and then re-experienced it and then finally got the truth. That is an unbelievably traumatizing realization to come to. And just the idea that someone who has been a victim of that for such a prolonged period of time, numerous times over the course of multiple years, the idea that person would marry the person who did that to them. And I mean, I'm sure that it's like just a sham marriage. Like, she is in control of him. She has basically sedated him, basically created just someone who is basically comatose. And so she doesn't like actually have to have like conversations with him or anything. She has his money. She has his resources. The problem is that it seems weird that, like, it doesn't track for me that any character would want to be that close to someone who did that to them. And not even that, like, I can kind of rationalize that because of the sense of control that she takes over him and his money and everything. But I think really the other side of it where I'm annoyed by the movie is that it introduces us to Slater King as someone who has been canceled for something that's vague, but then he is like the revelation throughout the movie. The movie explains to us that he is an outright evil, horrific person who is causing not only the rape and torment of numerous, countless women on this island, but also murdering the ones that, like Aaliyah Shawkat's character, murdering the ones that aren't receptive to it or aren't taking to the drug or taking to the memory thing. I wouldn't say he gets away with it because he's in like his own personal private hell and everything. But I think the fact that it's multiple people involved in this, I don't like that there isn't like a moment where everyone knows about it. There isn't a moment where this is exposed as a thing. And maybe that's the point, because obviously there are parallels to like fucking Jeffrey Epstein and Epstein Island and all of that stuff. But as someone who likes this type of social commentary, post-Me Too kind of like this messaging movie, this social commentary messaging movie, it really falls flat for me that the movie doesn't do anything to expose him or doesn't do anything to really make him reckon with it in a way that he's conscious of. And add to the fact that Frida is now closely tied to him because of his money and because of the marriage. It's just, it didn't work for me. It really fell apart for me in those final moments of the movie. And it left me questioning, like, what is Zoë Kravitz saying with this movie? What is the message behind this? Because it didn't work for me on multiple levels. Like on almost any level, it didn't work for me. So that is just about all I really can say about Blink Twice. I didn't like it. I ended up lowering it to 2 stars from 2.5 stars. Like I said, there's some interesting editing. There's some interesting choices in the like first half of the movie, but also in that first half of the movie, it's building up this mystery and it's not doing it in an effective way. It's very boring. Like it's very, very boring. And you have movies like Get Out that has like this simmering tension underneath it that's based on like race relations and everything. And then you have Sorry to Bother You, same kind of thing, where it has this big reveal at the end that's like completely out of left field, and it works really great because it is playing into that social commentary. And the messaging of it. Here, it's just a shock value thing that feels like it's made for people who want to pat themselves on the back for being progressive or being like quote unquote allies and outspoken allies about like the Me Too movement and gender dynamics and gender politics and everything, without really saying anything of meaning or substance to it. It's more performative. It's for those people that are performative and celebratory, self-celebratory, performative, progressive people who want to pat themselves on the back without really thinking too hard about what the meaning is behind it or what the messaging is. So I don't know. That's my soapbox. That's my spoiler. Those are my spoiler thoughts on Blink Twice. Really didn't like it, but I think that Zoë Kravitz does have some promise as a director, and I think I would be interested to see what she does more going forward, if she directs something else. So yeah. Okay, well, that is the secondary review for this week on the Obsessive Viewer podcast. I'm obviously not going to do a potpourri section, but that's it. Thank you so much to Sam and Mitch for joining me for the Crow review. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And Yeah, that's it for this week's episode of The Obsessive Viewer. As always, thank you so much for listening, and make sure to follow the show on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast app. Also, check out Obsessive Viewer Podcast's other shows, Tower Junkies, a Stephen King podcast, hosted by Tiny and myself, and Anthology, the Twilight Zone and classic sci-fi podcast, hosted by me. Next week on the show, I think we're going to be reviewing the new John Cho Blumhouse PG-13 horror movie, Afraid, and the secondary review is going to be for Slingshot, which I'm very excited about. So that's on the docket for next week. Until then, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next week. And now, enjoy this short clip from a recent Patreon-exclusive episode. For the full episode and more Patreon-exclusive content, sign up at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer.
But that is still like top 3 show of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Alongside like dramatic, long form narrative television would be like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad for me, maybe like Twin Peaks, maybe. Like, I don't know. I'd have to think like what else.
Are you a Wire super fan?
Dude, I haven't watched The Wire. It's like
neither have I.
It's a huge blind spot.
You guys gotta watch The Wire, man. It's the best show ever. It's the greatest thing in the world.
Yeah, I've never heard that before.
Honestly though, like
wait, that's supposed to be good.
Honestly,
I've only heard it's terrible.
I will say this: as much as people like pile on about how it's like I feel like there's such an air of like superiority. Like, you haven't watched The Wire? I guess you're watching like Love Island or something. As much as that is like a thing, The Wire's really fucking good. Like,
oh, I know.
It is.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to the Obsessive Viewer podcast. This episode was produced and edited by me, Matt Hurt. If you have feedback, thoughts on our episodes, or just want to connect, you can email me at matt@obsessiveviewer.com. For more information on this show, including a full archive of our episodes and show notes, visit obsessiveviewer.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please give us a follow on social media and subscribe to us on your podcast app of choice so you never miss an episode. Also, consider rating and reviewing the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Audible to help increase our visibility and grow our community. If you want to support the show and get early access to new episodes, as well as a steady stream of exclusive episodes, you can join our Patreon at patreon.com/obsessiveviewer. For information on more podcasts presented by obsessiveviewer.com, visit obsessiveviewer.com/podcasts. Our theme song is A Little Mad Sometimes by As Good As It Gets. For more of their music, check them out on Spotify and at asgoodasitgetsmusic.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.
See this episode's show notes for our unique promo code to get up to 2 months of free podcasting service with Libsyn when you sign up for a new account. Get your show on Apple and Spotify, get helpful stats and all the support you need to sound your very best.